So, for the last few weeks, we've been digging into how free speech can quietly start to fade away. Not because of some big, dramatic censorship law, but through this slow, creeping sense of uncertainty and, well, people just playing it safe. And I know listening to all of that can feel a little heavy.
In fact, you might be sitting there thinking exactly this. When you talk about decline, it's so easy to feel like it's just this unstoppable car rolling downhill with no brakes, a one-way trip. And that brings us to a way more important, and honestly, a much more hopeful question. Is there a rewind button? Can a whole system that's drifting away from free expression actually turn itself around and find its way back? It's really the most important question, isn't it? Because if the answer is no, then, well, all we're really doing is documenting something falling apart. But what if the answer is yes?
And it is. The answer is a clear, confident, and pretty reassuring yes. But how it gets stopped? That's where it gets really fascinating. It tells us so much about what a truly healthy system needs to actually survive. And spoiler alert, it's not about just hoping everyone has good intentions.
This right here gets to the heart of it all. This idea of systemic correction. It's not about finding perfect politicians or perfect citizens who never ever mess up. It's about having a system with working brakes, actual mechanisms that can spot when things are going too far, challenge it, and pull everything back into line. So where have we actually seen these brakes get slammed on in the real world? Let's look at some real-world examples, because this is where all that theory becomes real. We're going to dive into a couple of key legal cases that are kind of like mini stories of a system successfully hitting those brakes just in the nick of time.
Okay, so our first stop is this huge case from back in 1979 involving the Sunday Times. They were doing critical reporting on the absolutely devastating thalidomide scandal, but the UK court stepped in and blocked them. They literally stopped them from publishing. This is a classic case of what's called prior restraint. It's censorship that stops speech before it can even get out the door. But the newspaper didn't just roll over. They took their fight to the European Court of Human Rights, which, in a pretty groundbreaking decision, sided with them.
And this is a perfect picture of what correction actually looks like. I mean, think about the steps here. The overreach was identified. It was then challenged using the proper legal system. And this is the most important part. The final result wasn't just a win for one newspaper, it actually clarified the rules for everybody and basically reset the boundaries for press freedom going forward. But the court went even further. They dropped this absolute gem of a sentence into their ruling. And we have to break this down because it's just so important. What the court is saying is that if a law is vague, it's not really a proper law. People have to be able to know where the line is. If they don't know where the line is, they're going to stay miles away from it just to be safe. And that vagueness, that uncertainty itself, becomes a massive threat to free speech.
And this idea leads us straight to this key concept, the chilling effect. And this is not just some abstract idea from a textbook. It's a recognized legal concept here in the UK. It's that feeling of self-censorship, right? That moment where the uncertainty of a rule makes you just hesitate and maybe not say something that's completely and totally legal. That 1979 ruling was a direct shot at any law that creates that kind of chill.
Okay, so let's jump ahead to another test case, this time from 1993, and see how these ideas build on each other. This one is all domestic, right inside the UK. So you had a local government body, the Derbyshire County Council, and they felt a newspaper had defamed them, so they decided to sue. And this raised a really fascinating question. Should a government entity be allowed to use libel law to shut up its critic?
Well, the House of Lords came back with a very clear, very blunt answer. Absolutely not. They stopped the lawsuit cold, and they explicitly said that allowing lawsuits like this would have an inhibiting effect on free speech. Hey, there's that chilling effect again. This was a really critical correction, because it basically took away a powerful tool that government bodies could have used to quietly shut down debate.
But, it's really important to be honest about the limits of these legal breaks. If you look at countries like Hungary and Turkey, you'll see international courts ruling against their free speech violations again and again. And while that definitely helps, it documents the abuse, it can slow things down, it can't all by itself reverse a deep institutional slide. So here's the crucial way to think about it. External courts are like the brakes on a car, not the steering wheel. They can slow the car down, but they can't force the driver to turn around and head in the right direction. They really only work if the system at home still cares about what they have to say.
So, if we take all these examples, the successes and, the limitations, we can start to put together a kind of checklist. What are the essential things a system needs to have in place so it can spot a problem and actually correct its own course?
All right, here they are. 4 critical conditions for a system to be able to fix itself.
First, the law has to be clear. No vague, fuzzy rules that create that chilling effect we've been talking about. Second, the courts have to be independent, and people have to respect their decisions. A ruling doesn't mean a whole lot if everyone just ignores it. Third, and this is a big one today, enforcement can't have drifted entirely into private hands. If your boss or a social media company is the main judge of your speech, it's pretty tough for a court to step in and fix anything. And finally, and this one is so important, the people in power have to believe that one day they won't be in power. See, when power feels temporary, you can tolerate dissent, but when it starts to feel permanent, that's when you try to suppress it.
So let's bring this all home. What's the really honest conclusion we can draw from all this? When you look at the history, it gives us a pretty clear, even if it's a bit of a challenging, takeaway.
The decline is not inevitable. That is the good news. History proves that systems can have working brakes. Courts can step in, they can clarify rules, oversight can slow down the drift, and bad habits can be broken. But, and it's a huge but, all of these tools work way better when they're used early. Think of it like this. It is so much easier to correct a tiny skid on an icy road than it is to recover once you're in a full-blown spin.
And that leaves us with one final and I think pretty provocative question. We've seen that the law is a powerful tool for correction, but we've also seen its limits. It's only part of the picture. So if we really want to understand the full story of how a society protects free expression, we have to look beyond the courtroom. We have to ask ourselves, what else is at play? What are the cultural and institutional factors that ultimately decide whether free speech survives, not just on paper, but in practice, in our everyday lives? It's a big question, and definitely one worth thinking about. Thanks for listening.